You are listening to Animated Indulgence, the explicit and opinionated podcast where grown men talk about cartoons. Each episode will pick apart, analyze, and dissect an animated series or movie.
Warning, there will be spoilers, even potentially for shows and movies that are not the topic at hand.
We may watch cartoons, but we don't watch our language. Discretion is advised.
Welcome, listeners, to Animated Indulgence, Episode 5, the show where grown men watch cartoons and contemplate suicide because it's Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm Dennis.
I'm Eric.
I'm Mojoric. We'll see if we actually keep this intro.
Yeah, we'll see, maybe.
Today we'll be focusing on the first season of Yu-Gi-Oh! The Duel Monsters Tournament.
Yeah, first 40 episodes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess we're going to start with our spoiler-free summary.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's pretty straightforward. Yugi is a young boy who's interested in this card game where you summon monsters. It's a standard collectible card game. Summon monsters, use magic. Everything takes a dark turn when he's invited to this tournament and his grandpa's soul is kidnapped and sucked into a card. You know, standard fare. It's a damsel story, but instead of a hot girlfriend, it's grandpa.
Yeah, that's a good equivalent, man. I never saw it that way. That's really good. Yeah, it's pretty standard fare. You know, you've got a card game enthusiast in high school, island with a castle, you got ancient Egyptian magic. You know, all the standard stuff. It's pretty bland.
What do you think, Airhammer? We can sum it up. It's basically they play card games.
It's an anime about a card game. That's about it.
Yeah.
But they up it by throwing in the holographic aspect.
Yeah.
You know,
It's got some cool visuals to it. I'll give it that. It's a pretty show. Honestly, yeah, that synopsis, though, is the majority of the story. We could go into more details, but if you're wondering why we never talked about the magic, it's because the show doesn't. It just starts you off, you just accept it. It's like, hey, this kid has magic. Whatever.
Yeah. Yugi, the main character, has this magical object, it's called the Millennium Puzzle, that just has the soul of a pharaoh who happens to look almost identical to him, who's really good at games, and he sometimes takes over Yugi and makes him good. Basically, Yugi cheats. Yugi cheats. Every meaningful match he ever wins, he didn't actually win. Someone else stood in for him.
Wow, that's harsh. I don't want to be too harsh on it because there's a lot of fans, but it is a show that is devoid of substance and has all the pizzazz in its visuals. It really wants to show off what it wants to show off, and it does a good job of that. It's intensely melodramatic. It is pure melodrama.
Yeah, very over the top. It's. What do you think, Airhammer?
I'm not sure what else I can really talk about without starting on spoilers. But
We could sort of set up what the main characters are, what their motives, what they do. We have Yukimoto. Mojo's already covered him. Would you guys like to talk a bit more about him?
Yeah, okay, so we have Yugi. He's your typical high school student. He has that Millennium Puzzle, but he's never truly aware at first that it's ever reacting with him. It just happens. It seems to be like an additional guide on top of his body. Then you've got his best friend Joey, who was a former bully alongside their other friend Tristan. And then one of the girls from the school, Taya, is another friend. They just come together, they have fun, they occasionally play the card game. It seems pretty normal for them at the very start of the show.
Yeah, they play card games in class. Unfortunately, what you mentioned about Tristan and Taylor is pretty much it. They are just that other guy and the girl.
Yeah,
they don't really show a whole lot of
just there.
As mentioned, this show is about card games.
Card game.
Yeah,
a card game.
It's about a particular collectible trading card game that did not really exist at the time of its creation, but was created because of the show. I'm told there's a lot of inconsistencies between the real rules that people use and the actual show. I'm also told that there was a separate game by a different company that it may have been based on. I did not research it heavily. I've never played the game. But I think the card game idea is a cool mechanism for conflict because they rarely actually get in real fights. It's almost everything is resolved through playing a game, winner take all.
The creator purposefully wanted to make a show about conflict without actual, like, physical fighting.
Yeah, and that is a really cool concept. Unfortunately, it's executed extremely poorly in this show. Everything is told to you through words, and nothing is really shown through all those cool visuals that they like to use. It's a lot of flash and no real substance behind it. I know I keep saying that, but I can't hammer that home enough. I think at this point it's fairly clear that we don't like this show. We'll explain that very shortly. It's a show with a lot of really cool, interesting ideas none of them were really executed well or used together well, at least in season 1. And a lot of people say, oh, Duelist Kingdom is bad, but that's the first 40 episodes. It's not like we just dipped a spoon in and got a little taste with 2 episodes. No, we stuck it out for 40.
Yeah, 41.
So I think
I watched.
Yeah, true, 41. So I think that's more than a fair sample size.
Like I said, it's pretty standard fare. It's a Dancel story. Someone's being held captive, and the character has to try to overcome trials to get him back. It's a pretty standard plot. Not much to.
Shall we move on to expectations then?
Yeah.
Warning, the spoiler-free section is now over. Continue listening at your own risk. I think this might be one of the first shows where we all record our expectations, because I don't think any of us are all that familiar with this one. It's going to be a little bit interesting. Since we're watching only the first season, I'm expecting some overarching plot that actually exists, because I've seen a little bit of it. Not all of it, but I've seen a bit of it. So I know there's going to be some reoccurring plot progression. Other than that, I'm not really expecting much. I know I'm going to get tired of them explaining the same rules of the same cards every episode and being really repetitive about it, but it's going to be interesting. I'm not expecting to fall in love with the show and to want to watch the rest. But I'm not expecting to hate it. What do you guys think?
Well, I've seen the first season and a half, at least, of Yu-Gi-Oh!, but this was at least 15 years ago, so I'll be refreshing my memory on a little bit but from what I remember, it went from interesting to silly very quickly for me, so I don't really have expectations because I remember it enough.
Okay, fair enough. And Deus?
I expect pain and bullshit. I have rock bottom expectations of this show. What little I've seen did nothing to impress me. I expect all style and no substance. Whatever they try to do for a story, I don't expect it to be executed well at all. I don't know what the substance of this show is going to be, but I'm pretty sure it was never aimed at me and would have never appealed to me. Otherwise, I would have watched it when it came out. Obviously, there's something to it for somebody. I just hope there's a little bit more than nostalgia, because if I come out doing anything more than absolutely hating this, it'll be a victory on their part.
Okay, that's very, to the point. I guess that'll be it.
How about you kick us off, Airhammer? Your expectations.
Expectations.
How did they match up to what you expected? How did the real deal handle it?
Well, see, I guess out of the three of us, I'm the one that watched it when it first came out, which was like 2001. And I believe I watched the first 2 seasons before I kind of just dropped off with it. Because in all honesty, the show just really started to get silly and repetitive, and when it comes to revisiting it now, my expectations were, am I going to remember much of it? Will I enjoy what I thought I liked back then, or will it be a lot dumber? And I would have to go with the latter in this case. It did not age well for me.
Yeah, I'm in a very similar place. I didn't ever watch all as much as you did, but I did watch enough as a kid to be familiar with, at least Kaiba and the fact that Yugi has a soul in him, or another being in him, and I was familiar enough with the show. But yeah, pretty much it's everything expected. It's and that's not a good thing. Like, there's lots of repeat descriptions of stuff. Like,
yes.
We could literally see the same action replayed twice in the same duel, and they'll give us a full, long description of what the hell they're doing.
Yes. Yeah, this is one of the biggest issues that I saw. You will see a card, for an example, be explained during a duel, and then they'll go to commercial, and when they come back, you will see the exact same scene done from a completely different perspective, as in you're seeing it from an alternate universe or something, you know.
Yeah.
Weird way for me to say it. I don't know. Just why do we have to hear it again, but from a different context with different words inserted, maybe a different posture, a different section of the room that they're looking at.
And then immediately after it will switch to Taya, and she's like, "Oh my god, I can't believe he did that. Does that mean that this thing that was just said is going to happen?" It's like,
exactly.
Yes. It's like, come on. Yeah, that was something I knew was a thing in Yu-Gi-Oh! And I guess it might be a thing in this type of show in general, maybe. I'm not sure. Even what this type of show is. We'll talk about that more later. It's nice that there's a bit of continuity, though. That's one thing I didn't really remember all that much about in my expectations, I think. I can't even remember what I said my expectations, really, but I know at least there is some continuity. There's a moving plot forward, regardless of how bad it is. It could have been a lot worse. It could have been literally just them playing duels of cards for no reason, no plot at all. That would have been pretty bad.
Unlike the two of you, I never watched this when I was younger, when it was on. I would catch it on TV once in a while, and I would sort of make fun of it a little bit because of how preposterous some of the elements were. I know in my expectations, I jokingly said I expected pain and suffering. I didn't think it would be real. I didn't realize that this show would be more flimsy and shallow than I expected. How did that happen? I jokingly expected it to be a bad show, but I honestly expected, okay, I'm going in with a negative bias, but surely whatever people like about the show, surely whatever gripped a nation, the world, for the last 20 years to make this a franchise, I will see a glimmer of that. I didn't. I wanted it flipped. I wanted to see this negativity of mine turned around, and it never was. And maybe I didn't give it a chance. Maybe I went in not in the right mindset. But it had so many chances to turn it around for me, and it didn't. I expected a concrete story, and I don't think I got that. It started off very confusing with a lot of elements already in play. There was no real recap. I expected it to be character-driven because Yugi and Joey and Taya and Tristan are kind of a unit, almost a family. They're in practically every episode together. I expected it to really revolve around them supporting each other. The two of them are cheerleaders, for God's sake. It didn't happen. The setting was one of the coolest things about it. It's a modern set show with slightly more high-tech stuff and a cool ancient magical mystery. Hardly any of that was explored. Almost entirely in flashback. My expectations were a small hill before, and they were leveled into this giant strip mine.
It's pretty sad when a show, like, none of us had high expectations for it, and we came out not even meeting those. Shall we move on?
Please.
Yeah, so let's talk characters. There are some things I like, and specifically, I kind of like the Yami Yugi and the regular Yugi dynamic. I like that Yugi has to, like, question himself and think about, like, what the fuck is this thing doing to me?
Would you care to explain that a bit? Because I don't know that every listener would be fully entrenched with this idea.
So, like we said, that Yugi has this Millennium Puzzle. It has an ancient spirit of a pharaoh in it. And it takes him over when he plays games. But there's a couple points where the spirit starts making questionable decisions, like willing to hurt people or go at all costs to win. And Yugi has to, like, fight it. And the unfortunate thing here is that I like this aspect. They did not explore it enough. It's over in one episode. I like that it was touched on. I wish it would have been touched on more. And I kind of wanted to put that in characters because it has to do with those two. I use that loosely, characters. They're basically the same character. They're attached.
Yeah.
Other than that, there's The characters in the show, a lot of them are really, really forgettable. The cheerleaders, I barely fucking remember their names half the time. The only way I can remember, the reason I remember their name is I happen to stick to the fact that they both start with T, Taya and Tristan. It helps me remember them. They're basically just there. Tristan has some stuff later, like he becomes a detective almost. He goes around snooping around and finding clues and hints and stuff, and he gets a little growth. And maybe all these characters are fleshed out and expanded on in further seasons. And that's one thing I want to point out, in that this show's been long running. It has a lot of time to upgrade, a lot of time to better itself, but this first season definitely was lackluster. Maybe those characters do upgrade and get better later in the show. Right now, they're pretty boring. I think the show would be relatively same if we just removed Taya and Tristan.
I don't know. For me, Tristan was the worst character in the first 10 episodes, and this is mostly due to how he was presented. The voice actor, Sam Riegel, really didn't seem like he had any inspiration for the character. It's like he didn't really care. He just kind of gave Tristan this laid-back surfer attitude, and the character is just there. But then as of episode 11, Greg Abbey took over for the character, and they started to flush him out, and he actually turned into probably my second favorite character overall. It's a dramatic change if you go back and watch the first 10, and then all of a sudden he's completely different as of 11. As for Taya, she literally is just eye candy that repeats things that you just heard.
There is a kind of pseudo love interest for Yugi.
Yeah. Joey is like Molly and Sailor Moon. He is the Italian Brooklyn stereotype that is the best friend. He's there to comfort and be part cheerleader, like we've been saying. And then for Yugi,
he plays a kind of Gary Oak role. Did anyone else get those vibes? Kind of like, he's not quite Gary Oak. I just get kind of Gary Oak vibes. Especially at the end of the show, where they fight each other in one of the last duels. At the end of the season, rather.
One thing I noticed about Joey in particular is that his progression as a player is the one that's shown. Yugi just starts out as a master. Kaiba starts out as a master. Everybody else is either bottom tier or top tier when we see them. They're either regional champions or nobodies and stay that way. Joey is the only one who actually comes up from being a newbie and progresses his skill up to the point where he can compete. That was one of the funnest journeys of the show, and it was really marginalized, but it was there.
Yeah, he goes from nobody to pretty much the fourth best in the region.
I will point out that one thing about Joey that annoys the hell out of me is that he didn't just concede to Yugi in the final match. Because it's very much implied that Pegasus wants to fight Yugi, and that's the deal. That Pegasus has to fight Yugi for Yugi to get his grandpa's soul back. Not Pegasus fighting Joey. Pegasus will just give him his money and that's the end of the tournament. The fact that Joey didn't concede, it's like, okay, I know your grandpa's soul's captured and everything, but my sister's blind? I think that's more important.
I guess in a way, but I suppose with Pegasus being a dickhead that he is, he could have called them out for colluding if he had not given it everything. It was pretty flimsy, though. I mean, dead old man versus blind girl. Maybe she was going blind to death. That was the impression that I kept getting. His sister is going... Yeah, she's going blind to death.
Okay, where were we? Taya, she doesn't have her first duel until the 25th episode, and she's trying to remember her cards, and most of them are very different from what we've seen so far. When it came to Yugi, I focused more on his hair than his character. This has to be the most bizarre anime hairstyle I think I've ever seen, especially when this is supposed to be coming from a rather typical teenage boy. He has large, spiked, magenta-tinted black hair, and then in the front, he has even more bizarre blonde hair, and his grandfather's is pretty similar, but in gray.
Yes.
Can we talk for a moment about his dog collar and his giant biker chain holding 30 pounds of gold? He's not normal. That kid's punk. Yuki is punk as hell.
Yeah, he's pretty damn normal, and then all of a sudden he gets this Millennium Puzzle for a gift, and from then on it's like he's This is a very different kid. There's how many episodes later on in the next season where he's wearing black and leather and this and that. Like, what the hell? One thing I always question is when he transforms to Yami, why is it that no one questions that he's suddenly grown a foot?
Posture. I just told you he had 30 pounds of gold around his neck.
Those are our primary good characters. I guess we could go on to the antagonists. We have Brock from Pokemon, or sorry, Seto Kaiba, not Brock.
No, we have Kaiba Boy. Get it right.
Kaiba Boy. Eric Stewart, who voiced Brock from Pokemon, is here playing Seto Kaiba. You can't hear anything else if you've watched Pokemon first. For a character that is supposed to be so important, he doesn't appear much in the first season. Kaiba is like a millionaire. He owns his own company, and he just happens to be another student in Yugi's class.
I don't know if I believe that. Okay, I'm going to go off on a little tangent here, but the first thing I saw was Kaiba in a public school. I don't think I believe that. I don't think I believe he was actually a student. I think he was just there hanging out, just snooping about this card. I'm pretty sure he doesn't go to that school. Sorry, tangent over.
I know, he's in the uniform, he's just sitting there during lunch reading a book, and he overhears Yugi say his grandfather has some rare card, so, I don't know, he took a briefcase full of cards over to their shop, and once he realized it was a Blue Eyes White Dragon, he just wanted to obtain it by any way possible, and that's where it starts out this whole nonsense of the show. He basically threatens Yugi's grandfather into having a game just to compete for the card. Why he accepts this, I don't know. But ultimately, he loses. He gives up the card, and what does Kaiba do? He just tears the thing in half instead of using it. It's like, okay, I could have had 4.
He hit the limit. You can only have 3 per. It's the one rule it's the one rule they follow in the fucking anime.
Anyway, yeah, Kaiba Corp makes holographic projectors and a whole lot of other technological advances that we don't have here today, but he puts them all towards the game mostly, so this is where the whole duel arenas come from, which brings up the graphical part of the show.
We need to talk about Pegasus.
Yes.
I'll let you lead that off, Mojo. Pegasus is your boy. Go for it.
It'd be a massive oversight. I kind of, in a lot of ways, feel about Pegasus what Deus seems to feel about Gideon. Like, I don't like the show a whole lot, but the show would be absolutely unwatchable without Pegasus. He's this super flamboyant, maniacal dude. He has a reason for doing what he's doing. It's expressed later. His wife is gone. He's trying to contact her in the afterlife or whatever. He's just so flamboyantly weird. It's a spectacle to see him. Yeah, there's not much to really say about it. He's just super flamboyant, super strange, super maniacal. His deck of cards all based around cartoons, which is a neat little twist considering what you're listening to right now. I don't know, I just like him. Like I said, he has this backstory of his wife passing away, and he's trying to collect the Millennium Items because he thinks it'll let him contact her. So he's holding this tournament to try to lure. Apparently all the people with the Millennium Items are for some reason attracted to the card game. I don't know if that's ever explained or implied or what, but like I don't know how he thought the card game was the way to go about collecting all the Millennium Items. I don't know.
Maybe I missed that because he based the card game on ancient Egyptian stone tablet game thing that they did with real magic.
Yeah, so the whole, I guess we're starting to get into plot here. The backstory here is that Pegasus, one time or another, had a girlfriend that he grew up with, Cecilia. They got married, and shortly after she died of some disease. He's going around Egypt or whatever, comes along and finds this guy that's protecting the Millennium Items. One thing led to another, and he wound up becoming the so-called chosen one to receive the Millennium Eye. It's like, okay, you're a good person, now you have the eye, now you're a dick. What happened here? I don't think they really explain that. As for the card game, he simply, the tournament, rather, is that Pegasus is trying to get Yugi over to the island so that he can face him and win the puzzle. But that seems to be just it. By obtaining the puzzle, what will that accomplish? One of the other guys on the island during the tournament is Bakura, who is from their school as well, and he happens to have... He has the Millennium Ring, which we later learn contains an ancient thief that takes over Bakura's body and tries to manipulate people. He can actually summon monsters directly out of the card to attack people for real, so no holograms there. Yeah, around the end of the first season, he's actually attacking Pegasus, trying to get at his eye. So this goes farther into the show that we haven't watched. So you'll have to watch yourself to get more detail out of that. But yeah, I think you said much about Pegasus. He's got this flamboyant attitude. He's obsessed with taking on Yugi, but, he makes the tournament around it for, we need filler, right? Otherwise, he could just invite Yugi over to the island and challenge him directly, but where's the fun in that?
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous.
One character that stood out to me is Bandit Keith. It's a funny coincidence because in the show they call him the Intercontinental Champion.
The problem I had was none of the characters connected with me. They never tried to have any of the characters connect with me. They established the villains well because I could always tell who the bad guy was, what his gimmick was, and I liked that part of it. I didn't care so much about the villain of the day, and they established him or her well. I think the only character I really like is Mai. Mm-hmm. She's the female antagonist.
She's more of a Gary Oak-like character now I think about it.
I think so, yeah.
I could agree with that.
She starts as a rival or an antagonist. They meet her on the boat there. They have some interactions with her. They have a couple of duels against her between the characters. She starts as a cheater, then she stops cheating, then eventually she befriends them, and then eventually she saves Yugi's butt from not being able to enter the Final Four. So she turns around 180 degrees from being a complete bitch loner to almost their fifth team member.
Pretty much.
And there's this kind of little tension between. I know later on, isn't there romantic stuff between Joey and Mai?
I think that's later on. I did not see a whole lot of that, to be honest. It wasn't really apparent here. She's the only character I really connected with because she learns a lesson. She has personal growth throughout the story. This whole island could have been her story, because she's the only one who actually grows as an individual from what we've seen. Yeah. I really feel like the rest of the characters come off as uptight. Nobody's chill. They are self-confident to a fault. I would say that they're not realistic representation of teenagers in any way, or even relatable human beings. I suppose I'll take that back a bit. Once in a while they'll have a tender moment, some kind of connection between them, but I never really felt that. They didn't project that to me as an audience member.
Yeah, this was going to be something I brought up in plot, which we kind of dipped a little bit into when we dipped into Pegasus' backstory. The best parts of the plot is shit that happened before the show. The stuff that's going on now, who the fuck cares about? I don't care about the duels and shit going on now. When you flash back how... I like the story how Yugi and Taya met, for example. It's a little slice of life stuff like that. I liked how it showed Pegasus' backstory, or how it showed stuff with Kaiba and his little brother as a kid. The stuff that happened before the show was more interesting.
I'll agree with that. The flashbacks were always the highlights. Something else I'm not really sure where to put this in this podcast episode is that conflict is usually supposed to make some sort of tension or character growth between characters. We already mentioned that they're sort of a tell, don't show situation with this. And even after you accept that, I don't think the dual banter really adds anything. It doesn't do anything. When the characters talk to each other, when they're playing against each other, it doesn't build on their ideological differences or their progression in the main story or anything like that. They may mention what they're doing here and now in the story, and that doesn't have anything to do with this antagonist character. It's bizarre how they have this amazing conflict system and they can't leverage it to do even the most simple things.
And
the characters should grow.
They use it in bad ways too. Instead of telling stories with the cards, it's kind of just something that's there. They did happen to be doing it because at the end of the card game, the heart of the card saves the day. They fucking hope hard enough and they win. None of your strategy really mattered if you're just gonna sit and hope. Yeah,
the characters themselves don't really have that impact on their story that you would want to see. And that's one of the things about the characters and their journey through this very troubling time. Because honestly, if I was there as a teenager, that would be super stressful. That would be terrifying.
Yeah.
But they don't really grow
or
bond much. Yeah, they wouldn't grow or bond as a unit or anything. They start bonded. They start where they are. And only Joey progresses as a card game player, and only Maya progresses as a human being. And that's so unfortunate. I wanted to see some real progress, and nothing happens.
Yeah.
That's the biggest disappointment about this whole story to me, is that I wanted to see either a great story be told or see great characters grow, and I didn't get either.
Yeah, it kind of lacks on a lot of the fronts. What is your thoughts on the plot, Airhammer?
The plot.
Are we moving the
can
plot
I
now?
go? No,
Yeah.
but damn, can I go
ready.
into the plot?
I was ready to move the plot. Was there more characters?
Let's
There's
let
only-
Hammer.
I think there's only one other character that I really like to talk about, and that is Pegasus's right-hand man, Croquet, who I always
butler guy?
thought, yeah, he's basically Christian Bale's Batman. That is the tone of voice that I got out of this guy the entire time, was
For
that
me.
growly Christian Bale voice.
Did this guy leave that big of an impression on you?
No, it's just the voice.
Okay, because that guy is so unnotable in my mind that he was basically just a prop.
Let's
I
be
didn't
honest.
count
He's
him as a
Pegasus'
character.
cell phone. He is Pegasus' cell phone.
This is true. Let's see. The only other one I had on my notes were the Paradox twins, and oh boy, were they
Okay.
annoying.
I liked that episode, for the record. That's one of the few I actually liked. I liked the two-headed dragon. If for anyone that plays Magic, it's a format, Matt. But like the two-player 2v2 game style, I enjoyed that in that episode.
I liked it as well. I liked it as well for different reasons. Not for the characters, though.
No, those twins were
annoying.
just.
They finished each other's
They-
sentences and they rhymed and
Yes, exactly. They are always flipping around, and in the next scene, they're right back where they were. It's like, did they really flip, or was that just part of that whole anime aspect of? I don't even know how to describe it.
yeah, it's weird.
Okay, I think we can go on to plot.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, so let's talk about our plot. We already kind of discussed, would say, is the beginnings of it with Pegasus and his backstory. So after he got the Millennium Eye, he looked at all of these ancient engravings and monsters and various things that were in Egypt. He found out that it was a game back then, and so he turned it into a modern-day card game and distributed it. We now fast forward to how many years later? Yugi's a teenager. The card game is a big thing, and we have the whole thing with the grandfather losing to Kaiba, and Pegasus learns of this. So he sends out this crazy magical VHS tape that somehow plays as if it's a reality, and Pegasus plays against Yugi in the Shadow Realm, and then he takes his grandfather's soul and leaves behind the entry to the tournament. And God, what did I just say?
I'm glad you brought up the VHS tape because I have a huge problem with that.
It's like the world's shittiest golden ticket.
So think of it this way: he's using the Millennium Eye to predict the future and play a game with Yugi in the future as Yugi sees this video. Okay, that adds up. As magical and bullshit as it is, it adds up. And then Yugi starts beating him by doing unpredictable things. So he predicted that he couldn't predict. I'm out. This is episode 2. I'm out. Goodbye.
Okay.
Oh, wait. Is that what wait. Is that the context that we were supposed to get?
Yes.
Was that Pegasus was playing... Pegasus' past recording was playing with him in the Shadow Realm?
Yes. It was a past recording of Pegasus predicting the future.
I thought it was just
playing that
a
game.
step removed from that. Like, you put in the VHS into the player, they're connected in real time. Real time Pegasus is playing with him.
You know what? It doesn't matter. It's bullshit either way.
No.
Yeah.
This is important because is that what it is supposed to imply? Because you're right, that is fucked up. That's weird.
You know what? You might be right. I don't care anymore. I'm not making an argument for either one. That's what I got out of
fair
it.
enough.
You are pretty much correct, because it is difficult to tell exactly what that eye does. We're implied during the matches that he can simply use the eye to see what his opponent is seeing, and thus he can see his opponent's cards. But we see through this VHS tape and the flashback to when he fought Bandit Keith that he can literally tell the future and know exactly what this person's exact moves will be moments later.
Okay, I think there's two separate explanations for this. A, you're right. The Millennial Eye lets you see your opponent's sight. So therefore, Yugi later in the show can hide his hand from him and not show him because Yugi can't see it.
Mm-hmm.
But Pegasus is also just so much above Bandit Keith as a player, he knew what he was going to do. And
yes,
based on what he already... Okay, it's not only that Pegasus is such a better player than Bandit Keith, but he can also see Keith's hand, right?
Yeah.
And so I think maybe... Okay, we're putting way too much logical thought into this. It's a crappy...
I know! But it has to be explained, like, yeah.
It's a big plot hole. I'm trying way too hard to defend this, and I don't care. Let's move on.
It's like Pegasus just literally writes down what Keith will do, tells this kid, you're taking my seat, you follow exactly what's on this note, you're going to win the game. And he does. But that makes sense there. When it comes to the VHS tape, it doesn't make sense.
Oh, yeah, the VHS.
Because this is supposed to be a recording that still somehow has the eye magic. That doesn't make sense.
Okay, so my argument, the eye lets you see what your opponent sees, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we both agree on that. I think, like with Bandit Keith, he was able to tell he was just such a better caliber player combined with the fact that he was cheating. That's how he predicted that, and that's how But also, I think with the VHS tape, I think you got where was it implied that just because he put the VHS, like that whole experience was somehow contained on the VHS tape? Why can't it be that like that activated some magic and Pegasus is interacting with them in real time? Did it specifically say that Pegasus interactions all there were like pre-recorded?
That's what just makes it so bizarre because it's a
if
video.
That's the case, I agree, it's bizarre. I just never got that implication.
Between all that, we were actually talking about the plot, and we got really sidetracked. I guess I could quickly just jot down the plot in point form here. We have a tournament in which Pegasus is basically expecting Yugi to get to the finals, but we need filler. So we have Yugi's grandfather. He's on the line. Pegasus has his soul. Meanwhile, before the tournament started, the whole thing with Kaiba defeating the grandfather, so Yugi takes on Kaiba and actually manages to defeat him using his special cards known as Exodia. And so we now have this subplot where Seto's little brother Mokuba has managed to stow away on the ship and get over to the island so that he can face Yugi and try to avenge him. Then we have Joey, who has come along, and he's attempting to win prize money from the tournament so that he can give it to his sister so she can get the appropriate surgery because she's blind.
Going blind to death.
Blind to death.
Blind to death, exactly.
I'm not entirely certain how much this surgery is supposed to cost.
I mean, that's how Pegasus' wife died. He went blind to death. Didn't you know?
Not even Pegasus can earn enough money to stop blind to death.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this was one of the little things that irked me about the show. The winner will get whatever wish of their choice.
Oh, Pegasus reminds me of Sweet Tooth from Twisted Metal. That is the best comparison I could think of. He even offers a wish.
Yeah. When Yugi got his stuff, there were two particular cards that came with the kit. And one is for getting your wish at the end, if you won. And the second is to get the prize money. This is what is so screwed up about what little plot there is that Joey is coming along and competing alongside and against his friends, attempting to get this prize money, whereas Yugi is doing it just to save his grandfather. But it takes until episode 34 before Yugi finally says, the prize money, I don't give a shit. I've been planning to give it to you the entire fucking time. So it doesn't matter if you lose this tournament and I win it. You're going to get the money either way. Joey's been expecting this entire time that Yugi will just keep the money for himself. But they never bring it up until that point.
I know, it's so ridiculous. Joey actively trying to defeat Yugi means that Joey thinks that his sister not being blind is more important than Yugi's grandpa's soul. Sorry, Yugi, I like your gramps and all, but my sister's gonna be blind.
We should rename this segment, guys. This is Plot Holes in Theme. You guys are correct. The show has some major issues with the way the story is even structured. The story is definitely not something that they put a lot of time in. It shows fairly obviously that they weren't confident in their story right away because it starts off rushed. The first 2 episodes condense practically a movie's worth of content into 10 minutes so they can use the other 10 minutes to have a card game duel against one of the antagonists. It's ridiculously fast-paced and jarring at the beginning, and it stagnates in the center.
I want to say something. I think that part of the show's problem is that before it became an anime, when it was a manga still, It was about games in general. And it became this anime, and they had maybe someone threw the idea around about, like, hey, let's do cross-promotion and make an actual card game, let's start making money on the merchandise as well. And they just wanted to push the card game so hard, and they wanted to show the card game so much to get people to want to buy the cards and want to play the card game that everything else fell to the side.
To me, it feels like the opposite. I feel like there's no way a manga can stay in production in print as an advertising device because people have to buy it. I feel like the card game must have come as a consequence of the manga showing off this card game in some way, maybe in season 0, maybe in season 1.
The manga can be about whatever it wants, right? And then when they hit on the card game and people really liked it, they're like, oh, people really like this. We can make it all about the card game and sell a lot of cards.
I guess that's assuming that the TV series doesn't follow the manga.
Both shifted after the cards became big.
Like, what I know of as Season 0 followed the manga, which was ridiculously dark. The characters are pretty much there, but they are slightly different. I saw a couple of clips, and I see Joey, I see Tristan, I see Taya. The only real difference is her school uniform is a different color. Yami, in this case, was kind of a really dark character. What a dick!
Yeah.
We've talked a bit about some of the subplots in this current story before. Do you guys think that the subplots, like the kidnapping and the takeover and some of these sideline plots, are better than the main plot at any given time? Or do you think there's certain times that the main plot actually stands on its own?
I don't think the main plot really stands on its own at all. Not from my book. I am really more interested in... We don't even get an actual plot, but we get hints at a plot of what happened in ancient Egypt times. What the fuck? How do you get to be a pharaoh and the king of games? How does that happen? What does being the king of games imply? I want to see the ancient Egyptian version. Like, the stuff that is hinted at in the back sounds more interesting than what is actually happening.
To me, the ancient Egyptian magic stuff pays off so little in the show I watch, I wish it wasn't there. I wish it wasn't even a plot point until season 2, 3, whatever. I just wish it didn't exist and I didn't have to get confused by it.
Fair enough.
I've got a question. Airhammer, specifically for you, but also to you, Mojo. To me, the card duels, as they're presented in the show, feel a bit like pro wrestling. The drama is hyped up, and the action feels like filler before the predetermined end. Do you guys get that vibe from it, or is this something that I'm imprinting on it myself?
I don't know. I'm not familiar enough with wrestling. I would say that it's always... Everything does feel kind of predetermined. I get that vibe. I understand what you mean by that, but what do you think, Airhammer?
A lot of it is just a little too dramatic. There are aspects of this anime that are just missing to me. First of all, where are the authorities? Where is the police? At no point does anyone think, okay, my grandfather has just had his soul taken from him. He's this empty shell at my home, or in this case in the hospital. We're not going to talk to the police in any way. Of course, it would be completely bizarre. They wouldn't believe a thing, but...
They don't even try.
It's like every conflict in this season is dealt with through a card game rather than anything else. You're being threatened, and instead of doing something about it, you just duel them. Some honorable thing is supposed to happen if you just happen to win.
Actually, now that you talk about it like that, yeah, it's definitely like wrestling. I suppose even with the colorful themed characters, like, can you imagine Rex versus Weevil? Those guys are totally luchadors.
Yeah, I can kind of see it now that I think about it. I get how you would think that, yeah.
You look at Kaiba's holographic system in that he has actually designed it in such a way that not only do you see the monster, but you get to feel it, smell it. There are things about it that are physical. So when he faces Yugi later on at the castle, Kaiba gets to the point where he's literally just going to stand on the edge and say, if you take this move and destroy my monster, the excessive force of whatever wind happens is going to push me over the edge. I'll fall to my death. Ultimately, Yugi gives up the duel.
Well, I actually brought that up because that brings me to something I noticed, and that's that in a show with cool ancient Egyptian magic and stuff, technology is the greatest magic wand of all.
Yeah.
Kaiba's technology is more magical and does more fantastic, bizarre, out-of-this-world things than any of the ancient Egyptian puzzles, rings, wands, rods. All of that stuff is downplayed.
A hologram's a bit more believable than soul sucking out.
A hologram that can push you and that you can...
Oh, it's
smell.
not believable at all, but it is slightly more believable than having my soul sucked out through a VHS tape.
The technology definitely advances within the first few episodes after what we watched. Eventually, they introduce basically a virtual holodeck where you sit in a pod and you're connected to it, and your mind is transmitted into this thing, and you can literally fight against the monsters, earn currency, yada yada yada. But we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Still, one of the most striking scenes to me is when Kaiba is in his secret underground lair, and he's talking to his computer. He's basically Tony Stark at this point in the show. He's talking to his computer, and he's real-time hacking a satellite to crash it into some building, and his computer tells it, "I'm crashing." What?
It's a very self-aware computer. Kaiba has the worst Jarvis.
It doesn't, because his computer can crash and continue functioning for a good 3 to 5 minutes.
I think I meant the voice.
The voice is terrible, but again shows magic wand element to technology. Technology, especially technology created by Seto Kaiba, can do anything.
Conflicts will always result with a duel. This is, if you're watching the English dub, you will notice that something just seems to be missing. The one aspect that you would think a lot of these scenarios would involve, and that is a weapon. This is why I call this invisible gun syndrome.
That's got to be brought up in localization.
There are multiple scenes where either Pegasus and his security team are randomly pointing at Yugi and the others, and you wonder what is going on, and this is because the guns have been edited out. It's like when Keith eventually loses to Joey, he rushes back in and points his finger at Pegasus and threatens him. What's he doing? Oh, the gun is missing. Right. Okay, he's actually got a gun to his head. You don't know this because you only see a finger. Go on to Google and check it out. You will see the original Japanese version.
That's something we'll bring up in localization. Anything else to say about the plot specifically before we move on to theme?
I don't think I've got much else on that one. Nope.
At one point, I started to ask myself this and watched a couple episodes with this in mind. I didn't come to conclusive decisions, but I think my answer is no. I'll ask you guys. Maybe you can give me some evidence to point to yes. Do you think this show could be a satire of the shonen genre, the whole Dragon Ball Z conflict genre? Do you think it could be maybe even a satire of the original manga that it comes from? Do you think that the producers didn't care and just wanted to make a joke out of it?
I don't think so. I think it's supposed to be just an alternate take on it. It definitely has inspirations from shonen stuff. Like, think a recurring thing in shonens, like I'm thinking Dragon Ball Z at the moment, like tournaments and shit.
Oh, it's definitely a shonen, just with not really fighting style. But I was just wondering because it's so preposterous. I could not understand. I could not comprehend this at face value, and I had to start asking myself: is this a parody? Is this a satire? Is this whole thing a joke?
I think it's looking too much into it to expect them to try to do this on purpose. I just think it's bad.
Maybe it is, but could you help? Could you blame me for looking for something?
I don't, but...
Yeah, it's like the question is, how do you adapt a card game into an anime?
I want to talk about this more later, so...
Similar to how later, eventually, we're going to watch Beyblade, and how do you turn a game about ricocheting tops into an anime?
I don't know about that one,
don't know.
but I have ideas for card games, though. What about theme, guys?
I don't think there's much to it. To me, I got two real themes out of this. One is the message of never give up, which I think is probably one of the reasons Joey did not give up to Yugi, is because the core concept of this show is never give up. You know, good guys never give up. I think another one for me is, this one actually stuck with me more, this one I actually enjoyed, is put your heart into everything you care about. If you love this stupid little card game, live it, love it, breathe it. Yeah, embrace your passions, and that was really cool.
That's actually one thing I really like about the show. In a show that I don't like as a whole, it's nice to find little gems that you do like, and that's one thing I do like about the show, in that it presents people who might otherwise be looked down upon. I was a geeky kid in my school. I hung out at school and just played card games. You were just the weird geeky group of kids playing inside things. And the kids that play those geeky card games go on a big adventure. It's kind of a crappy one. It's not a very good show. It could have been done better, but it puts those kids in the highlight. I like, embrace what you love. Don't be afraid to geek out about it. All these kids love this card game. Even the cheerleaders who don't seem to be that great at playing it themselves enjoy the culture around it. They know the stuff about the card game. They know who the tournament leaders are. They follow the tournaments and stuff. That's something I like about it.
Indeed.
That's the other thing about the show that bugged me, is that the cards just show a picture and have absolutely no information on them. This is obviously due to the animation style, but the actual cards that we would physically have will have the instructions on them, whereas here they don't. And in the show, they act as if you're supposed to simply know what they do.
I think this might be a localization thing. I think in the Japanese version, don't they have text on them?
No, they don't.
Oh, stand corrected.
That's the whole thing about the fill aspect of the show. This card has come up, but we've never heard about it. What does it do? The person that has it happens to know what it does, but there's no instructions on the card.
And it leaves everything feeling like people are pulling shit out of their ass. Or like, hey,
yeah.
This card does this thing, don't you know? It's not written anymore, but it totally does this thing. Don't worry about it. I have 3,000 attack points, now you lose.
That's a really interesting phenomenon, and I'm going to blame it on the same thing I mentioned earlier on in the show, is that the way they use the conflict resolution of the card game is really poor. The way they tell the story is really poor. Every card game they do should tell a little story of its own. There should be a back-and-forth struggle, something to test the protagonist. And in that case, it's not. It's just a sequence of random events that carry on. And it's up to them to give us a story that we can follow. We shouldn't need to know the rules of the game to enjoy a show about the game. It should get us into the game. It should make us want to learn the rules of the game, not require knowledge of the rules, which, as I understand, by the first season, they did not play by any official rules. They may have been playing closer to the original Japanese Bandai version of the game than the Konami game that everybody knows here in the West, but regardless, I don't need to know the rules of the game for you to tell me a good story, and they failed miserably. I think there was one game that I could follow along with really well. That was Yugi versus Panic, where he was using this darkness thing, and Yugi, through his actions in the game, was able to slowly set up a contraption, almost this Rube Goldberg machine, to eventually trap Panic in his own little trickery and have everything come crashing down on him in a very visual way. That felt good. That was something I could actually follow. I thought for a moment the show was turning around and getting better. It wasn't. That was the best duel in the entire series to me.
Yeah, there's another thing. When Yugi initially defeats Kaiba, he uses his puzzle to send Kaiba's dark, evil aspect of himself to the Shadow Realm. And then later on, when Mokuba is being held hostage, Yugi has to face Kaiba again. But it turns out that it's a physical manifestation of that darkness, which has returned. So not only is that bizarre enough, but the fact that Seto doesn't change how he acts regardless of what has just occurred. So what exactly is it that Yugi did to him? Why did he do it to him? Why is Kaiba still a dick even after he did it to him? They don't explain this. I don't get it. Yeah. Let's move on.
I guess next we're going to do something a little bit different for this episode that we haven't done before. We're going to bring on a couple guests and ask them a couple questions.
We're joined here by Saga Media and Winged Regent, who are fans of Yu-Gi-Oh! For a very long time. How you guys doing? Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us. I'm doing great right now. It's an honor to be on the podcast with you guys.
That's a lie. It's not an honor, but I do thank you for being on here.
Okay, if I have to tone that, it's very fun and appreciated.
Fair enough.
It's appreciated and fantastic. But yeah, thank you guys for having us. It's a blast so far.
Well, we wanted to get the perspective of someone who actually enjoys this, because it wouldn't be fair to trash on the show all the time and not see the good in it. So we wanted to talk to you guys about that. Do you remember what originally drew you to Yu-Gi-Oh! And what kept you coming back from war? What kept it from being just, this thing you watch to something you actually really love to indulge in, something you're passionate about?
I remember for me, what originally drew me into Yu-Gi-Oh! Was In one hand, it was like the start of the plot, because we had the whole start of Duelist Kingdom, and then we had, Pegasus doing his whole thing with the Millennium Puzzle, trying to get his hands on it. And for some reason back then, the plot actually drew me in, and it also felt like it hit at just the right moment, because it came out around the time when Pokemon was getting big and anime was starting to really hit its stride in America. When Yu-Gi-Oh came out, it kind of hit that perfect point where people of that age were looking for something to collect. You had Yu-Gi-Oh! The anime and then the card game. And when that both kind of came hand in hand, it kind of pretty much hit that sweet spot where it was like, oh, we're looking for these things to collect. There's this anime about a card game, and then there's this actual card game, based on the anime. That was one of the main things that kept me going in with Yu-Gi-Oh! And then after Duelist Kingdom, I felt the series really hit its stride with Battle City, the second season. And from there, kind of just kept me grabbed on, at least through the first series of Yu-Gi-Oh! The Pokemon card game was there, but it was mostly about the anime and the actual video game. But Yu-Gi-Oh! Was the first of its kind, at least in America, the first of its kind where you had a card game in an anime, and so you had a card game built around an anime, and then people were collecting the cards because of that relationship at the time.
The extra layer isn't there. In Pokemon, there's a card game, but it's cards based on the stuff in the show itself. And Yu-Gi-Oh! It's cards based on the cards in the show itself. I get it. There's like a extra layer of connectedness. It's kind of something I didn't really think about. What about you, Saga?
What originally drew me in was when I get home from school, back in middle school, I believe it was, I'd come home, turn on Kids WB, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Started playing, and that's when I was supposed to do homework, but I'd be watching TV at the same time, of course. And I started watching it, and I enjoyed it, and I just got hooked because I liked the story itself. I got really engrossed into each of these characters and their struggle. Kaiba, was someone who was super confident. He was someone that had no challenges. And we had tons of challenges. Then everything he knew, his entire world got struck down and it was destroyed. And he had the resolve to fight back up. And then we have Pegasus going nuts, taking everyone's souls. And it's like, what's going on? What's with this guy? Why's he doing this? And then you had Yugi, who had a dual personality going on, but you later find out it's a different persona, and he had a weaker side, but his more confident and darker side, and that creates his own struggle, internal. That right there was a good thing that just kept me coming back more and more. But another thing that worked well with this is I had a lot of friends that played Magic the Gathering, and I was always interested in that and played a little bit with them, and I'd use someone else's deck. These cards, we could actually get them ourselves, and it's like, oh, this is cool. It's like, you saw these cards in the show, and you want to get them for yourself in your life, and so it's kind of like a fun collecting tangent, kind of like a Wing was talking about earlier. That right there was a really good pull, because the people that liked playing Magic the Gathering started to switch. So it kind of made a new change at the table. When you're at lunchroom, you guys had something to talk about. And it wasn't like it is now, where internet accessibility wasn't as strong. Back then, I had dial-up. I couldn't go on and watch any anime or any TV show I wanted to go watch. I had to watch what was on TV, and nowadays I don't even watch TV at all. So it was a good placement where it was and at the time. So that's probably why I'd say that really got me, but the story itself is what really kept me coming back for more.
Nice. Like a kind of a you had no choice, and it had a real world counterpart.
I also want to piggyback a little off of what Saga mentioned about the plot, and add that the plot in Yu-Gi-Oh! Was a lot more nuanced than a lot of children's shows or anime at the time. Because a good example, as Saga implied, is you look at Kaiba's character development. Kaiba was Yugi's rival, but Kaiba was not entirely made out to be straight up the villain. He was never really the villain of the whole series. He was the rival, he was the obstacle at points, but he was never one-to-one the villain of any arc in particular. Even in Duelist Kingdom, when he was frankly at his worst as a character, he had a reason for what he was doing, and it was understood what he was doing. He was doing for his little brother.
That leads directly into the next question I was going to ask. Do you guys think that the heavy drama in the show makes a difference in how you perceived it? I know a lot of children's programming is comedy, or is light, or is more direct in how the conflicts are addressed. Do you think how Yu-Gi-Oh! Did that differently than the norm made a difference for you?
I'm going to say yes, definitely. Because I'm more of a person that likes a show that takes itself more serious. I like a show that's not too lighthearted and friendly. I like something that's really it really pulls out your emotions or feelings. And yeah, the drama was good at many points, but at times it went a little too far, like with friendship and such, which is like, don't have to use that all the time. But nonetheless, I like the series as itself. I really enjoyed the art style back then, and I still do. And I thought the audio really did well with it, like in the fights, the battles and stuff, because it made it feel like it was really real, and came, thrown in your face. A lot of times they did keep things serious enough where I wasn't starting to fade away.
I would say in the long run, it certainly helped in regards to the show's perception. The drama in the show and the background story behind it made a reason for everything to happen. Like, we can sit here and make the jokes, about, they're deciding the fate of the world over a children's card game. But at the same time, it gave a focus for whatever, everyone was doing to some degree. Every character had their own personal story. Like, every participant in, Battle City had their own story going into it, between Yugi doing it for his reasons, Marek doing it. Obviously, Marek was the one trying to take over the world with the children's card game. Joey Wheeler doing it for his reasons. It really helped along the lines of keeping the show grounded, not just some random, collect-a-thon here and there of an anime or just some slice of life with a card game in it. It helped give a focus, and on a very long-standing focus, particularly with the first series, regarding what was going on in the background, what these characters are doing, what was their purpose in each arc. In that regard, it helped create an investment in the characters, because every single character had something that they were fighting for.
You brought up something really interesting that I hadn't noticed until now, but I completely agree with you, is that the characters have a very clear motivation. As over the top as some of them can be, there's no doubt about why they're doing what they're doing and what their goals are. So I can definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, the goals aren't muddled or anything. Just taking from Duelist Kingdom, Rex Raptor was a champion duelist. He wanted to go to Duelist Kingdom to prove that he was the best. Weevil Underwood wanted to end Yugi, and the quote-unquote myth that is, Yugi-Moto. He does the underhanded thing of taking the Exodia cards and throwing them into the ocean right from the start to hamper Yugi's chances, and then his first duel in Duelist Kingdom is Yugi. He loses, but that was his goal. His goal right there was to try to get rid of Yugi. You had Joey Wheeler, who was doing it for his sister. You had Pegasus, who was doing it for the Millennium Puzzle, and then we find out his actual purposes at the very end of Duelist Kingdom. So even though Pegasus comes off as the villain, he even had his own reason for doing what he was doing. And as a result, he comes off as much more of a sympathetic villain by the end of it, in my opinion. Then you had, obviously, Yugi doing it for his purposes because he wanted to stop Pegasus and, save his grandfather's soul, because what Pegasus did with the Millennium Eye. And then you had Kaiba's purpose with Mokuba. Pretty much everyone in Duelist Kingdom had a particular reason for what they were doing. Whether it was simply to borrow from another children's anime, whether it was simply to be the very best like no one ever was, or if it was to save a family or a relative from imminent danger.
Well said.
I guess I could ask my question. I wanted to ask, what do you guys think of the link between the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime and the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game? And do you think one could survive without the other and vice versa?
I would say that the anime, it blatantly cheats from the rules quite a bit. There's a bunch of silly stuff. They summon cards you can't summon. Their life points, start out differently in multiple seasons. In the anime, certain cards may actually gain new abilities or be played in a bit different way. And it's the continuity kind of fails there on it. They work hand in hand. I'd say if you didn't have one or the other, they would have fallen a lot sooner. If you just had one or the other, I think it'd be a lot weaker and it wouldn't be so strong, and the momentum in the fan base just would not be there.
I actually mentioned this with Pokemon as well, and I've mentioned that I really feel that Yu-Gi-Oh! The card game and anime are kind of... They're a circle. They cycle on each other. One can't really... They push on each other. But the Pokemon we talked about as well is like a maybe three-wheel, like a three-prong. They have a video games as well. That's the biggest prong, obviously. What do you think, Ringed?
I think when it comes to Yu-Gi-Oh! The anime and Yu-Gi-Oh! The card game, at first they were loosely linked because, as Saga mentioned, they blatantly cheat in Duelist Kingdom. And that's a consequence of Duelist Kingdom being made before the actual card game. And then when the card game came out, they made the anime follow the card game. So from Battle City onward, the actual rules of the card game apply to the anime. And I think that really helped establish that cycle. So now the anime helps with the card game. You see certain deck archetypes in the anime that could be used in the card game, and then the card game comes out with a structure deck based off of that, and then the card game moves on from there, and then they feed off each other from there. It's to the point now where if you watch any of the recent Yu-Gi-Oh series, the card archetypes and deck archetypes that are being used in the anime are viable decks in the modern card game. The decks in the anime now are very much a deck you can use in, card game. You probably won't do well in tournaments for obvious reasons, because the tournament decks are just, another step above. But these are decks that are 40 to 45 cards with the proper balance of monsters, spells, and traps, with the right effects that synergize off each other perfectly. These cards now actually work well between anime and card game with very little tweaking, if no tweaking at all, needing to be done, as compared to the starter decks that came out for Yugi, Kaiba, Joey, and Pegasus at the very beginning of Yu-Gi-Oh! So I do think that the anime and card game feed off each other in a way. I don't think it's as tight of a cycle as you can make it out to be, because I still follow the card game, but I don't follow the recent anime series as closely as I used to. As a general rule, I do think that they do feed off each other to some degree.
Fair enough.
What do you think kept Yu-Gi-Oh! As a 20-year franchise rather than just a fad?
I'd say the ability to watch anime and then go home or go with your friends and play the card game yourself was a good starting point. Later on, though, with anything, you can't keep it standard. You can't keep it boring. You have to keep changing, upgrading, and manipulating your content. So by them refreshing the game by making different kinds of summons, new cards, new card designs, reprinting cards, but in different ways of look and art, it was a way to refresh the series. So that way, it just kept pushing forward. Going into the anime, you actually saw different versions of the same card. Going back to what you mentioned, that other magician person, because his magician was actually a dark magician, but he was a red color versus like Yugi purplish color. Yeah, so that kind of a show of the different print versions of the cards. But yeah, by adding like the synchro summons and the XYZ, and then what's the latest
Pendulums.
one? That's where I've kind of stopped in the card game. As after that point, it's like I don't know how that works, and I haven't spent the time to even look into it, because it's like, okay, this looks like very, very mind raping. I don't have time for this, but nonetheless, that constant changing is going to keep people coming back for more. If you do the same thing over and over and over, and there's no new content, your players, they leave because there's nothing new to do. It gets boring, it gets dull, it's stale.
Yeah, I think what Saga mentioned holds very true in regards to Yu-Gi-Oh! They kept rejuvenating it with different cards, different not rules, but different ways to summon, different ways to do different things. The anime kept rejuvenating itself with each series, not like they added different things to each series. In the long run, I think that really helped with Yu-Gi-Oh! Like a good example as a counterpoint would be something to the extent of Pokemon. The thing with Pokemon is that when you watch the anime in Pokemon, it goes through a flowchart where Ash never wins the Pokemon League. He leaves with Pikachu, and then all of a sudden Ash feels like he's back to this state of he doesn't know what a coughing is. He legit pulls out a Pokedex to scan a coughing in the recent series, and it's kind of like, why? You've seen this Pokemon for years, and I feel that Yu-Gi-Oh! Does well to avoid those pitfalls, because it's giving us new lead characters, new threats, new cards, new cast every time they want to rejuvenate the series.
But to keep rejuvenating it by adding these new content, these new ways of playing the game, and new strategies and new techniques. So
by adding motorcycles.
Games on motorcycles.
That's just silly.
That's just silly.
It happened at one point.
I abandoned it on that point.
5Ds, was it? I think it was 5Ds.
I stopped watching at that point.
Yeah, like by then I had fallen out as well. I had stopped around GX.
Remember, you want to take this home and ask your question?
Of the first season, what did you feel was the silliest thing that you saw, whether it's part of the plot, the design? What ultimately made you want to stop watching? And I guess this can extend on to the further series if you've gone beyond the first.
It was around the time, it was after the Orichalco season.
Same.
After the what season?
The German guy, his arc, I guess.
Yeah, there's an arc later on in the first series called the Seal of Orichalco arc. It's a filler series that's not in the manga. It's an anime thing.
They went to another tournament-ish deal, and Kaiba was being hacked, and it just felt like it felt a little repetitive at that point. Previously, it was great. We had a lot of energy. We just kept pushing forward. And here I was like, I have no reason to be invested in these characters. I don't know why you're so upset. There's no... Previously, we had reasons that we felt emotionally distraught when things happened. Here, it's just like, okay, it's a tournament. Whoop-de-freaking-do. Why do I care? There's no excitement about it. There's no energy. There's just, okay, just going through the motions. And to me, that was where I kind of stopped. And they also started going reruns. As I mentioned, I was watching it back on TV, so you saw one new episode every Saturday morning, and you watched the reruns on Monday through Friday. But on that Saturday morning, you got up early to go see it. This was so much fun and great. And it was just a giant letdown. It was a disappointment at that point. And that's where I'd like to leave off on that.
For me, I have to say it was actually around the exact same point. The Seal of Orichalcos arc did nothing for me. If anything, like, I liked the filler arcs that they did introduce. Dungeon Dice Monsters was kind of neat. I liked the arcs in Yu-Gi-Oh! Where they deviated from the card game and they did their own little spin on things. Dungeon Dice Monsters was kind of cool. I liked I forgot the name of the arc, but the arc where they're all in like the online game where they're not dueling per se, but it's like they're moving the piece. Mm-hmm.
That was really interesting.
Yeah, like it played like the anime played off like a little bit of like the Duelist of the Roses PS2 game, and I thought that was kind of cool.
That game was amazing, by the way.
But like they had like these little intricate little arcs where they didn't play by the rules. There was one arc where it played off like an RPG. Where, you know, Yugi and them had like these pieces of armor, and they were playing it like it was an actual role-playing game online, and that was being run by pretty much the board of Kaiba Corp that was trying to screw over Kaiba's investments, like, if I'm not mistaken. And those arcs were neat. The Seal of Orichalcos arc threw a wrinkle in the whole series regarding like this card that had like this mystical power over the duelists, where if they kept using it or they kept feeding into it, they could get consumed by the card and they became like these evil entities. And there was really no investment in the characters. Like, every person on the villain side of things had that card in their deck. So there's like no real investment to those characters, except for like the guy second in command who did Raphael, thank you, who did like a heel face turn somewhere in there, and then had his little moment in between there. But the thing that really kind of hurt that series for me was when I saw Yugi get the Seal of Orichalcos slipped in his deck. And he's having like this internal dilemma of, do I use it? Do I not? Should I use it? Should I not? Going back and forth I think it was a duel against Raphael. He's going, should I use it? Should I not? And I'm sitting here watching this going, if this was Yugi in character, this isn't even a thought in his mind to use this card.
I think it was more of a fight between Yugi and Yami in reality.
Right, and then it became, more about Yugi and Yami because Yami opted to play the Seal of Orichalcos. And then when Yugi broke free of that control, he pretty much surrendered the duel. And given the stakes that were going on in that arc, it felt almost out of character for Yugi to catch himself in that slump. And knowing that this arc doesn't happen in the manga, and his anime only just kind of had me sit there and go, this doesn't make sense. I don't agree with how they handled this. And it completely zapped me out of Yu-Gi-Oh!
You know what? I'm sure it's great material for the abridged series. Sometimes I can't be sad that this shitty stuff exists because we have the fans that make the great stuff out of it.
I have a question, because I haven't actually seen the Series Zero, if you will, the one that was in 1988, that was more closely based on the manga, and this goes to Wing. What was your thoughts about that reflected to the first season?
Oh, wow. Season Zero is... I think if Season Zero aired first instead of Duelist Kingdom, I think it would have done a little more of a not a disservice to Yu-Gi-Oh, but it would have created a wider disconnect, because even like so far as like the character designs are different, a lot of the character personalities are different between Duelist Kingdom and Season Zero. Season Zero is a lot more grounded and a lot more brutal in some of the really aspects of the character. Yeah, it's totally different.
If they had released Season Zero here as the first season instead of Season 1, I don't think the show would have took off like it did, right? Because
this is a lot darker.
It was a lot darker. It wasn't really aimed at kids. It wasn't a kids show, right? It was more like Cowboy Bebop, Trigun, that Full Metal Alchemist maybe. That type of...
yeah, I could easily see that.
It was more of an adult thing, and yeah, it would have had an audience maybe. There would have been fans, but it wouldn't have blown up. It wouldn't have been a sensation of a bunch of kids wanting to buy cards. And,
No.
Because it would have been a different time slot. It would have been on like Adult Swim instead of Saturday morning cartoons.
I think one of the things that you can argue is that if you leave Yu-Gi-Oh! In its unedited format, completely uncut, no edits or anything, I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Itself would find itself in like an Adult Swim format, because there's so many things that were changed by 4Kids in regards to dialogue and scripting and card designs that eventually found their way to the real card game, that were altered. Yu-Gi-Oh! Season 0 is just on another step above that. The Duelist Kingdom arc and onward plays up Yami's Mind Crush or whatever it is, where he does that. They play it up as he's clearing their mind. But in Season 0, it's far worse than that. He is legit making a point to give the person a mental collapse.
Yeah, driving them to insanity or making them a mental vegetable.
Mm-hmm. Didn't he blind a few people as well?
Wasn't there like a story about him torturing someone, Deis?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there was.
Yeah, there was one. There was one where I believe he caught... This is from the manga. I don't remember if this was represented in the anime, but there's this arc where these guys were being perverts to Taya, and were getting upskirt shots of Taya, and were harassing her, and blah blah blah.
That alone
and then,
made it into the original show.
No, it not at all. They reference it in main series. They come close to it. They dance around calling it an upskirt, but you get the drift of it. Yeah. Like what they're trying to do, because 4Kids, they're subtle, but not that subtle.
Yeah, I recall the scene. Yeah. They changed it from that to a simple robbery.
Thank you so much, both of you, for hanging out and joining us. You guys are superheroes. Here we are back in the past again, before those were recorded. Is there anything you guys want to talk about with the fans and culture? Because I think the fandom is something we could not connect with, and that's really the failing of us on this episode, is that we can't talk about this at all from their perspective.
I know at this point, outside of just Yu-Gi-Oh!, this might be the first of many shows that we come across on this podcast that we just can't connect with. I think that's going to be okay to happen from time to time. And I think it might be because we're so far disconnected from it. We didn't watch it as it was becoming a phenomenon. It's all after the fact for us.
I would like to relate something personal right now. For me, this show was, my first real encounter with this rival phenomenon that seems to be a lot stronger in Japanese culture and shown in anime. I was never really familiar with the idea of an antagonist who isn't really a bad guy. And it was confusing at first, because to me, what I grew up on here in the West, the bad guys were bad, the good guys were good, and this created this gray area. I think maybe other people felt that way too, and this idea of Yugi versus Joey, of Yugi versus Kaiba especially, was really intriguing because of that gray area. I also really love the terminology they use for playing games against each other. I love that they call it a duel.
The fact that the show has continued and has had how many different sequels over the years is astonishing, because it just doesn't seem back then that there would be enough of a lasting impact to keep going, but it has.
So obviously it's doing something right for some people. It just doesn't hit
us.
Which is okay. Not everything. We're not going to like everything. Not everyone is going to like everything.
That seems like a good way to transition into our next segment. How would we make it better for us? Would you like me to lead off?
I'm thinking about it, so go ahead.
I had to think about this one, so I wrote down some notes. The first thing I would do is rebuild the narrative. The same core story of them having to go to an island, but I would have Yugi's grandpa go with them. I would have Bakura go with them. They would have 2 guests each or whatnot. It would be Yugi and Joey, because Yugi shares his chips. They would already have this plan of, no matter what, we're in this together, but I'm not going to go easy on you when I fight you. I think that would start off so much better. Have at least 10 episodes before they hit the boat to explain the whole Kaiba situation. The invitation wouldn't have to be so damn dramatic, and not everything would have to be super risky right from the beginning. I think it would be so much better to ease into it, to have the plot escalate as they get to the island and realize how dangerous it was. And then, bam, right there in the middle, out of nowhere, Yugi's grandpa gets his soul stolen. And they don't have a hospital on the island. So now there's a timer. It's not just about Yugi's grandpa. It's also, he's going to literally die. He's not going to be just a vegetable. There is no getting better. I think that would start things off very well. And then the Bakura segment where they do the shadow game, move that near the end. I thought his involvement at the end was really cool. It was a nice twist, but he'd already sort of spoiled his existence. Move it all to the end so he's a huge surprise. Also, it could have been a story about the consequences of fame, where Kaiba and Pegasus are both famous and rich, and they're dicks. And Yuki's becoming famous, and he struggles with becoming a dick. In fact, you kind of see that where he refuses to beat Kaiba because he doesn't want to be that guy who could take that, even take the risk of knocking Kaiba off and hurting him. At least then there would be some sort of story to it. I think there should be more everyday stuff that isn't the card game going on to help build up the character relationships.
Yeah,
I
even
think
Pokemon has non-Pokemon fight stuff going on.
I would have made every duel between the characters matter. If it's on screen for more than just a few seconds, I would have had it tell a story. I would have had the conflict mean something to showcase some aspect of the characters. I would have introduced the characters better, but especially Yamayuki. I would have had him almost like a non-presence at the beginning, and you're like, oh, there's something suspicious going on, and then bam, they surprise you with it. I would have had the drama be a little more natural for everyday duels and save this super high melodrama for when it's really important. I would have also added a greater sense of mystery around the artifacts. I think the way they told it made you interested in them. I would have made them a lot more curious and added more little breadcrumbs and eventually spoiled it all near the end of the season. I would have had that more entwined with what we saw. These are just some basic storytelling things. I don't think the core idea is flawed. I think the way they did it was wrong. I am afraid that the people making this produced and directed other things. I'm done bitching. One of you guys, please, take over.
Go ahead, Airhammer.
Apply logic? No, I guess you spelled it out quite well there, Days. I'm not really sure what I could think of to make this better.
Yeah, I didn't go with my thoughts. I didn't as in depth with a lot of individual stuff like you did, but I did touch on some similar ideas. I do think that all the battles should be relevant, either tell a story in themselves or show character flaws, progress character progression, do something for the story. They should never have a filler battle. My most important thing, or whatever, I know it's fixed later, but for the first season, the fact that there's no real rules to the game really bugs me. I've played a lot of actual card games in real life, and the lack of rules is aggravating. So that's another thing I'd make it better. Make the first season, redo it, follow an actual structure of card game rules. Which leads into real life card games. And I think that'd be a really good way to make this show better, in that have them be actual like duels that could have happened in real life. I don't know if you need to go this far, but an idea I had that I think would be a cool way to write for a show is have actual players play matches and write the stories around that. I think that would be really cool.
I'm not sure I agree with the idea that you need a set of rules to be known to understand a story. I think I could watch a good story about a boxing match or a horse race and comprehend what's told to me if it's told well.
Oh, yeah, I think that you can. I'm not saying these are absolutely necessary. I just think that these would make an interesting, better version, in my opinion. Have it to where if you do know the rules, it actually makes sense. It's an actual thing that could have happened. I think it's obvious that they wrote cards and they wrote stuff for the show and not the other way around. I think it missed opportunity for a cross-media experience. They're only loosely based on each other, and they can't really be...
What would you guys say if you've discovered that the show follows the manga very closely and the manga predates the card game? How would you feel about that?
Well, I know that's true.
Well, I don't know how closely it follows the manga, to be honest.
I think it follows the manga. The manga started focusing heavily on the card game as well at one point, right?
Well, it did, but I mean story-wise. If they followed the story almost exactly from the manga, how would you feel about that?
I don't know. I think it has similar thoughts. I don't know why that would change it.
Does the manga come before the cards? It's actually a story.
I get what you're meaning. It's just a glaring flaw in it. They should have made rules that made sense. Even if it came beforehand. Even before it came out that there was original things. He could have put more effort into making stuff make sense.
And maybe he did. Maybe it doesn't follow the manga that strictly. I don't know.
But did you have anything else how you could make it better? Or real-life card games, Airhammer? Did you ever play any real-life card games? You said you played Pokemon, right?
I collected a number of the cards, and I probably played 2 or 3 of the actual game itself. I'm not sure if I've ever actually seen a Yu-Gi-Oh card in person.
Okay.
That is surprising.
I might have in a case and not really been paying enough attention to notice that it was one.
So I guess maybe we want to move on. This is to a segment we usually have much earlier in that podcast, the intro. And all I have to say about the intro is for the longest time, instead of your move, when I was younger, I thought it was saying yo moo. I don't know. They don't enunciate very well in the intro.
Yo moo.
Yeah, I always heard yo moo. That's my thoughts of the intro. It's very forgettable. It's someone saying your move over and over again to like intro segment. It's nice to look at. No one writes home about how much they love the Yu-Gi-Oh intro. At least not this one. At least not mine.
You know, most people just make fun of the dual part, and that's about it.
You should make fun of it because it's preposterous. One thing in the early episodes is the early episodes precede the intro with a short monologue about the ancient Egyptian pharaohs and the millennium items. Man, did they screw that up. That entire part of the backstory is not really relevant when you're first watching.
Yeah.
That should be saved as a surprise. I want to hear more about Yugi Moto, who he is, how he found this puzzle, and what's up with the pharaoh inside the puzzle. Maybe I should be hearing about that instead of this ancient Egyptian crap that doesn't really have any bearing on the story I'm going to watch for the next 40 episodes.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Why are you recapping something irrelevant? I did notice one thing. I don't know if you guys saw this, but at least in some episodes near the end season, I don't know if this is for all the episodes in the season, but there's a creepy, super realistic face in a very quick flash cut montage. It looks like a tanned Pegasus cosplay. I'm not the only one that saw it. I had other people verify. Other than the main theme, the songs in the show are actually pretty good. It has a tremendous score. I was really impressed. The background music is freaking good. Like, really good. I don't care much for the one or two vocal tracks. It's not really my thing, but even they're not terrible. The score is really good. Anything else you guys want to talk about with the music?
It doesn't do vocals well, but the instrumental stuff is all really good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it got this mildly electronic rock vibe to it.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about something that's one of the worst aspects of the show, that is that pile of shit, is the sound effects. Holy crap. Dragons sound like random clip sounds of birds. I'm pretty sure I saw a monster that literally sounded like a fucking squeak toy. Yeah, shitty sound effects, shitty sound effects, shitty sound effects, the shittiest sound effects. Oh, and did I mention shitty SFX?
I don't know. I didn't really notice it. I should pay more attention.
I don't know how you
to that
didn't.
stuff,
Of all the bad things I brought up, this is the most bargain basement bullshit in the entire series.
when you think back on it, it's just crap. It's just not something I noticed in the time. What do you think, Airhammer?
Yeah, you covered it well.
Wait, do you want to cover it again? Because I'm pretty sure you could say it another 4 times and it would be okay.
That's all right.
I think you broke Airhammer.
I think this show broke me.
It
Want to
broke
move
you
on to
after
the
a
art?
couple episodes.
Want to move on?
Sure, we'll move on to something from the worst of it to probably the best of it. Let's do that.
Yeah, the art. You're right. The art is the best, absolute best thing about the entire show.
I will stop you slightly, though. Yes, the visuals are amazing in some regards. Looking at something more modern right now, we have Dragon Ball Super, which a lot of people will complain of how the art is just bizarre in many of the frames or scenes or whatever it is. I took note that in at least 3 episodes of what we watched, the art took a nosedive when it came to the character models. Specifically episodes 5, 11, and 25. If you watch close enough, everything from the previous episode, which looked amazing, looks completely off model in these. You'll have static looking faces, you'll have facial features which have just completely changed shape or size, looking at how they talk or the way that part of their outfit is designed. It looks completely off from the rest of the season, and you're thinking, who animated this particular part?
Oh yeah, I will absolutely agree that the consistency of the quality is atrocious. There's times when there are just horribly drawn scenes, horribly animated parts, and I will give you that. But the style, when they actually give it some funding, it looks good. All the characters are very unique looking. They all have their own style and own design. They gave time and thought into what they're going to look like and how they're designed. And that's very much on the creator. And all the monsters, fantastic. Look, I really want to play a Final Fantasy JRPG game with those type of monsters. That's where they'd fit in, or maybe in a tabletop RP. The art for the monsters is really top notch. Some of them are really iconic. Like Blue Eyes White Dragon is a big iconic thing in Yu-Gi-Oh! And for a reason, it looks amazing.
I agree. I think the main characters and monsters all have a really high level of detail and really clean designs. It really showcases the best of what the Japanese anime style has to offer. I also really enjoyed the very signature dark black shading, almost like comic inking. That is something that is purely unique to Yu-Gi-Oh! I've never seen it anywhere else.
Lots of big, dark, black outlines.
I think it also is, as you said, sometimes a little cheap, even in the animation, whereas you guys saw the visual quality drop for some of the characters. I saw a lot of scenes that were very low-budget animations, and that's not to say they aren't well done, it's just that they use lip flaps along almost static images. They really know how to get the most out of their animation budget, and I think that strengthens it as a visual piece.
The art is the best part of this show. It is beautiful.
Shoutouts need to be given to the background artists in this show. I really enjoyed the backgrounds in this show, especially at the end of the season inside the Pegasus Castle. The background art was gorgeous. It was lush. I enjoyed the background art more than what was going on in the foreground. It broke my heart when they used the Shadow Realm to black out the cool backgrounds.
Yeah. It's all good, and you're right. The background art is pretty good. It's a very passive thing for me, so I didn't really think to mention it. But yeah, it's really good. Everything you look at in the show, you're going to be treated.
I suppose there is one part of the art that is contentious. Let's say, let's talk about the character hairstyles.
I was going to mention that.
Hammer, you're probably going to go on Yugi's, right?
It's so sharp you could poke an eye out.
For some reason, the hair that bugs me the most is fucking Joey's. Is there some kind of like weird deformity on his forehead that's holding up that hair? It's always bugged me. Or something holding up that flap of hair. We use a lot of product.
The only other thing about the art is the clothing that defies gravity.
I think that marries up well with the hair that defies gravity.
Have you noticed Kaiba's, trench coat or whatever, how the back of it just kind of hovers in the air in a specific wavy form? It's not draped at his ankles. What the hell?
I have not.
Oh, I did, yeah. I definitely saw that. It's as if he's constantly caught in a still frame of being in a strong breeze.
Yes.
Okay.
No, please. I want to hear more rants. I don't want to be the only one that's ranted. Let's hear some stuff about the clothes, the hair.
That's pretty much it. Like,
you call that a rant?
I'm not sure what we can rant on. The hairstyles.
All I know is his hair defies gravity.
They're unique. Some of them are just bizarrely done.
Is Yuki's hair naturally that colored?
Sure, I get the fact that in anime, characters can have pretty much any color of hair, but the fact that it is spiked in such a way and it is two completely different colors, that can't be natural.
They live in a world where there's ancient Egyptians trapped in puzzles that could steal your soul. Maybe hair's not that big of a stretch. There's a lot of questionable choices with hair design. Even though Yugi's hair is so iconic, everyone's wearing hair product in this. Now we're on hair indulgence.
This is Yu-Gi-Oh! I would be upset if we didn't talk about the hair at least a little. I would have scrapped this entire episode and we would be re-recording this whole thing if we didn't talk about the hair stuff. But yeah, it's fine. We can move on now.
Comparisons, inspirations, and influences. I will say there's a lot of, I don't even know what you call it, like that classic anime cutaway where like they slice up the screen and show like a facial reaction of every person in the scene in slices. What do they call that? There's got to be a name for it. There's a lot of that type of stuff. I'd like to throw the comparison with Speed Racer.
Please elaborate.
It gives me a lot of vibes of what people seem to be implying of Speed Racer when they parody it. We'll throw in like, say, the Family Guy parody where they talk really rapidly and explain themselves a lot.
I can't say I saw that. I suppose I did see the somewhat sloppy use of localization, but that's for a few moments. For me, I think it's similar to a shonen. Well, it is a shonen, but it uses the shonen formula. I think it's similar to sports manga, especially with the non-traditional struggles. Obviously, it's influenced by Magic Gathering and other collectible card games.
Yeah, obviously. What do you think, Airhammer? Do you think it has any connections to Speed Racer?
Not from what I've seen, no.
I know the inspirations and influence of the creator. He wanted to make an anime that had some kind of conflict, but be not violent. The characters who are combating aren't actually hurting each other directly. There's this neat interview I will try to find a link to and put into the show notes with the creator about how he really enjoyed games as a kid, and that is why it's all about games and why he's used that as the narrative, because he always felt like in card games he was some kind of godlike hero.
I was going to ask Hammer if he had any ideas of anything that has been influenced by this or had an impact on its creation.
I want to say the third season of Digimon, which involved cards. Because when you see the first episode of the English version of the third season, they are talking about how Digimon has been a card game this entire time, and the first 2 seasons of the anime are actually fictional to that universe.
That's some kind of horse shit.
Yeah.
That's for a story for another time, though, when we get to Digimon, because I'm not really happy with that. Continue.
Yeah, I would say that was definitely inspiration there.
That's out of an obvious one. It definitely inspired Beyblade, or maybe not directly inspired, but definitely set precedent for Beyblade to be a thing, right?
I can see that for sure. I want to say the visuals are heavily, and I mean heavily, inspired by JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Yukimoto and Jotaro Joestar, I don't know if they go to the same school, but they go to the same district. So much JoJo in the visuals. Also the angular designs, the stances, the poses, the customized school uniforms, the tough guy little additions to the clothes. Holy crap, there's so much JoJo in this.
Definitely see that from, you linked me not some comparisons, but some
art
shots of art of JoJo, and I definitely see it. How about localization, guys?
Well, it's 4 kids.
There's that. There's a lot of the standard name changes. I think Joey's name was butchered in the translation, right? I think Yugi's the only one that really survived.
Yeah, because his name is in the title of the show that doesn't make any fucking sense, by the way. Would someone care to explain the title of the show? No?
There
okay.
is no explaining it. It's better not brought up, because as far as I can tell, there's no relevance. He's Yugi. Oh, okay. The localization is it's pretty standard fare. The major thing is what we already talked about with the guns being turned into just hands.
I would say that the voice acting is actually reasonably good for the dialogue, but then when they have to make any kind of non-word vocalization, a grunt, a hum, the sound of stress, the sound of curiosity, everything that is not a word is absolute trash.
The voice cast is pretty good. Yugi's pretty passable. I like Joey's voice. Seems a lot more in place. There's a list of changes out there somewhere between the Japanese and American versions.
I'll get that in the show notes.
We've been covering it, the names for sure. Yugi was Yugi. The Kaiba brothers were pretty much the only ones in the first season to retain their names in full. Some of them maybe retain their first name but not their last. Pegasus, for example, and Mai. Yeah, I like the voice cast. We mentioned Eric Stewart. Maddie Blaustein, who played Meowth, she did Grandpa Moto.
I guess my only other major thing with localization is where the fuck is Season 0?
Because it's really, really dark.
Okay, I actually know why it was skipped over. I know you pointed out that it's really dark, but I think, and I mentioned my thoughts regarding this earlier, and I think that maybe they wanted to skip to the card game.
I'm sure they did. I'm sure they wanted to skip the dark, non-kid-friendly stuff and get to the card game, but I agree with you. It's a critical flaw in not taking time to recap the stuff that happened in Season 0. They don't give you any introductions to the character, the premise. There's nothing. It just starts off super cold and then speeds its way into the doldrums of the main plot. It's bad. And maybe as a Season 2, it was okay, but I still wish that there was some recap if this was a different animation studio, a different tone. I don't understand why they had to stand on the shoulders of that previous show to tell an almost independent story about the same characters later in life.
Yeah, I am trying to imagine that any other show where they take the first couple seasons, right, and you take the first season off, make it its own thing, and start at Season 2. I can't think of any show where it would actually be good, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Shows don't do that. What the fuck were you doing? Why?
Nothing with a serialized plot, anyway. Episodic, I could see that happening.
Yeah, maybe it could happen. It wouldn't interrupt the flow of the show if it was episodic. Do you know anything about Season 0, Airhammer?
Not much else. I really do have to look into it more. I'm not sure how much the actual card game was played in it. I just know that Yami was very different than he is in what we saw.
What little I know of it is from the first volume of the manga that I read some years ago. We needed a recap. Not a full season, but a recap.
I think Season 0 is supposed to be completely separate, as in the continuity is completely different. What we see does not involve Season 0 at all. That never happened.
I can accept that.
It's a different world.
But we still have 0 character introductions. We need some sort of recap. They could have licensed that footage for one episode and done a recap. I couldn't get into the show with it starting as bizarrely cold as it did.
Yeah, it's like a weird, like the world's largest cold open. And the cold open is an entire season.
Flashbacks in episode 20, 30 doesn't cut it.
You want to move on to supplemental?
I think we already have. We mentioned season 0 quite a bit.
I guess we kind of transitioned to it naturally.
Well, we've mentioned season 0. Let's get into the rest of the supplemental media.
There's the manga, of course.
Obviously.
And other than that, it's kind of obvious. The card game, duh. But there's also the video games, which are misleading because they're not... They are video games, right? You're playing them on a video screen with a controller, but they're just the card game, digitalized. Which is not to say it's a bad thing. It's just a card game in a different form.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are familiar with that these days, thanks to Hearthstone being really phenomenal digital card game.
Yeah, Hearthstone and Magic the Gathering Online, and I'm pretty sure there's actually even a Pokemon, or actually I know there's a Pokemon equivalent, and I think there might be a Yu-Gi-Oh! One as well. But it would be mind-blowing to me if there wasn't. The supplemental media is all pretty standard fare. It's also, obviously, I don't know if this really fits here, but the rest of the show. I'm sure the show changes and gets better, and then probably even gets worse again before it gets better. And it's a long series show. Every one of these big shonen things, we're not giving 100% fair chance. Obviously, we gave the first season a chance, but the show as a whole, I'd like to point out that, yeah, we're still only judging the first season. There's the rest of the show to watch.
I'll reiterate that I think 40 episodes is a handsome sample size. I think any show should have got their point across by then.
I agree, but the nature of the show makes it a little bit different. I think if it was 40 episodes of a complete show that's 120 long, yes, that's more than a fair sample size. Gigantic, but this show is not that. This is a show that's, there are hundreds and hundreds of episodes over how many seasons, and it's still ongoing?
To my recollection, there are 200 or so episodes of just this show. Then there are the sequel series, which are also obviously supplemental media, as they are continuation of the continuity, but as I understand, time skips and not really related to the individual crew.
Okay, fair enough.
As in, we see characters like Yugi Moto in only cameo appearances in the next series, GX.
I did not know that. I just always assumed it was all one long show.
It is very much the idea. I believe in the future seasons actually go into the science fiction of it. It's almost like Star Trek: The Next Generation, where they step away from the source material to do their own narratives.
It's a lot more like, say, Star Trek: The Next Generation to the original series, or maybe even Dragon Ball Z to Dragon Ball, than it is the individual arcs.
I would say even Dragon Ball Z is not so much, because they at least keep the same characters. This ditches most of the characters and only has them play cameos, to my knowledge, and eventually ages out. So I would say it's
I just
interesting.
I just always assumed that all the sister shows were kind of like how Pokemon is still an ongoing anime, right? But they changed. Like, it's Pokemon XY now. It's Pokemon Sun and Moon. They changed the subline of the anime, but it's still the same show. I always assumed that's what Yu-Gi-Oh! Was doing as well.
This is actually good. I'm glad we got into this, because yes, Yugi Moto's story does come to an end. It closes at the end of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, and then Yu-Gi-Oh! GX starts.
I'm actually glad you brought this up, because while I don't really like the show all that much, and I'm not going to put a gigantic high priority on this, if I know Yugi's story ends at a certain point, I might be intrigued to finish the rest of the show, the rest of Yugi's story at some point. Way down the line, but I'm a lot more intrigued by it now. I'm glad this was brought up.
Okay, well, you said you're curious to watch the rest of Yukimoto's story. I'm not. I'm never going back to the series. Season 1 has poisoned me to this, and it's going to take a long time for me to recover and give the franchise a chance.
I'm not even all that interested in doing another episode on it. I just might be on my own personal watch list eventually.
I am a dedicated enough podcaster, though, to really dig into the material. I watched the end of Yugi Moto's story. You see, a couple years ago, I'm not sure exactly when, within the last 2 or 3 years as of this recording, they released a movie that continues Yugi Moto's story after the finale of his series. At this point, they are all high school seniors, and they're getting ready to graduate within the next couple weeks. I don't know how much time that is, because they never say how old they are, and they all look like they're 24. Except for Yugi, who looks like he's 8. Now, this story brings back all the classic characters. I won't spoil it too much, because this is on Yu-Gi-Oh! Season 1, but what was the name of the movie again?
Hey, we have our fucking spoiler thing at the beginning.
It feels a little rotten to spoil something that even fans might not have seen.
Okay, it's only been out.
Okay, well, this Dark Dimension movie has Yuki, Taya, Tristan, Joey all coming back. Even Bakura. Bakura's their 5th guy now. He's hanging out with them. He's all clean. He's off the junk.
No more ring for me.
He has a little withdrawal. Spoilers, he has a little withdrawal fit later.
He went to Rings Anonymous with Sonic.
Yeah, exactly. But the movie has Seto Kaiba digging up the discarded and empty puzzle that no longer houses the at-peace Pharaoh's soul. He is intent on putting this together in his space station shaped like his corporate logo so he can put it together in zero gravity and harness his power.
Jesus.
He is going to force Yugimoto to become the Pharaoh again just so that he can duel the Pharaoh one last time and beat him. He is a Bond villain. He is obsessed. It's hilarious. He has developed more holographic technology. I'm fairly certain he's a cyborg at this point. And he has made hologram projectors that work on your thoughts. So anything you think can be real. He goes so far. His ego is so big that he insults God the Creator. He says, what I make is better, because if I made this world, it would be better than this one we live in. He is absurdly over the top. He is a freaking cyborg with a glowing arm that
Spent too much
has
time
created...
on Pegasus.
Yeah, he is out there. It is hilarious. And his whole goal is to play a card game. That is his life now. It has a new antagonist. Kaiba actually isn't the villain of this, despite what it may sound like. The antagonist is kind of tacked on as you expect a movie antagonist to be, but it has some context to the show. You get to revisit a lot of old favorite themes of the show. You get to see amazing CGI monsters. If you guys thought the monsters were good when they were drawn, imagine 10 times the money put into super cool CGI monsters. But I did go far to watch that. It is a really good tribute to the fans, and I guess the anniversary of Yu-Gi-Oh! And how things have progressed. I think any fan of the original show who watched and finished the story of Yugimoto needs to watch this movie. It's kind of what you deserve, because I won't call it great, but it is at least watchable for someone who doesn't like Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yeah, I might check it. I'm going to check it out eventually. But to wrap up the supplemental section, I think it'd be a shame to overlook Yu-Gi-Oh! Bridged. It's not really a official supplemental thing, but it's definitely something we'll link to. I was looking into it the other day, actually, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Bridged might have been the thing that really kind of kick-started the abridged genre on YouTube. So
yes, it was one of the two first, along with Naruto Abridged.
So yeah, that's very notable, because if you're not aware, it is a pretty big thing on YouTube. It's kind of a big YouTube genre to comically make recuts of shows, particularly anime. So this is part of an internet culture history. With that, shall we kind of move on to final thoughts, or what?
I think it's an old show. It's kind of dated. I don't think that's a problem, though, because old shows are typically not judged based on their age. I think the idea that it is for children only, that it is aged, that it's just a kid show, that it's just a cartoon, are poor excuses for the low quality I saw. This is 10 years after Akira. This is 4 years after Disney's Gargoyles. There's no excuse for it to be this bad. I really wanted to see something shining amid the darkness. I saw so little. I think the fans really should avoid coming back to this one. Watch the abridged series, watch clips. Don't watch full episodes, don't watch the full season. I don't think it's going to be the show that you like. I grew up with stuff like He-Man and Thundercats. I understand. Nostalgia is strong, but some things can't be returned to. I think this show deserves a remake for the nostalgic fans, because it's gone on long enough. That's my final thoughts.
What about you, Airhammer?
I'm kind of with you on wanting to rewatch more of it, but at the same time, I feel it would drive me nuts. I may want to try and at least check out an episode of the other series that have followed it to see what's different. This movie that we're talking about, if Kaiba's that nuts, I have to see it.
Maybe we'll make a movie night and special, some kind of thing involving.
Like you had me at Space Station. That's just what made it too bizarre for me.
You sold it for me.
And the funny thing, it's not really a plot point. It's just a set.
I'm interested now, though.
Again, the fact that this all draws down to a card game, I don't get it. There is no logic here.
My final thoughts on it are, like, it's not my thing. I'm glad it exists for the other people who like it, though. And I really, really think it's a missed opportunity. As a fan of actual real-life card games, who's someone who went to and played tons of Magic the Gathering at tournaments, and played at Friday Night Magic every freaking week, and played Magic in the lunchroom with all my friends during lunch, I think this is a very missed opportunity for a show about card games. I hope that future seasons and stuff do it better, and I hear they do. I would have done stuff differently. That's my final thoughts.
I can compound on what you guys said, I think. You guys mentioned logic a few times, and I just realized, why are we thinking about logic? And I think in this sense, we need logic because this isn't a silly show. It is a hyper-dramatic show. It takes itself entirely too seriously to be as nonsensical as it is. I think that juxtaposition of super serious in how it treats itself, super silly in how it treats the audience, turns me away more than anything else. I was curious enough to watch the movie because I wanted to see how far it had progressed. I wanted to see what modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Looks like. I wanted a glimpse. And I don't regret checking out that movie. It was watchable. But seeing this has turned me off from watching the rest of the series for sure. And probably turned me off from watching GX. Maybe 5Ds, maybe Zexel. I don't know. I definitely don't want to watch anything close to this again. It wasn't enjoyable in any way.
Okay. I guess we could leave it there. This has been episode 5.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Bye.
sad now.